and arbitrary detention thus far of our beloved colleague and journalist anchor here, Marzieh Hashemi, one of Press TV's finest. She's been detained by federal authorities in the States while visiting sick relatives there. And now we're going to jump into a quick package. Now, Mrs. Hashemi, a news presenter and filmmaker working for Iran's English language Press TV right here news network, has been detained in the U.S. on unspecified charges. American-born journalist says that she was handcuffed, shackled, and treated like a criminal. We'll tell you more about her arrest right here.
U.S. authorities have detained Press TV's anchor and documentary filmmaker Marzieh Hashemi on unspecified charges. The 59-year-old was arrested upon arrival at St. Louis Lambert International Airport on Sunday and transferred by the FBI to a detention facility in Washington, D.C. The American-born journalist had arrived in the U.S. to visit her ailing brother and other family members. Hashemi's relatives were unable to contact her, and she was allowed to contact her daughter only 2 days after her arrest. The news presenter told her daughter that she was handcuffed and shackled and was being treated like a criminal. Hashemi also said she had her hijab forcibly removed and was photographed without her headscarf upon arrival at the prison. She was also only offered pork as a meal, which is prohibited in Islam. The only food she had over the past 2 days has been a packet of crackers. Iran's foreign ministry strongly condemned Hashemi's detention.
We condemn the illegal arrest of Marzieh Hashemi, the reporter and presenter of Press TV, and the inhuman treatment of her in a jail in Washington.
The ministry also called on the U.S. to immediately release the journalist. Hashemi was born Melanie Franklin in the United States and changed her name after converting to Islam. She has been living in Iran for years.
And now we're joined out of Westchester University, out of Westchester, Pennsylvania, Dr. Lawrence Davidson, professor there, and Saeb, Shaath, author and Middle East affairs expert there out of Belfast. Hello, both gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I want to start there with you, Professor Davidson. Your thoughts on Marzieh's subsequent arrest without, telling her relatives anything for over 48 hours' time.
Right. Well, I think this is part of a tete-a-tete, wherein, in both countries, both Iran and in the U.S., there are elements which are really determined to ratchet up the tensions. And in the U.S., obviously the Trump administration has expressed, anti-Iranian sentiment, which is which the previous administration had tried to dampen down, and so as a consequence of this, on both sides, there have been a number of arrests, and so I think this is in part of that series of tension-building episodes. I have no doubt that that this reporter has done nothing, and that it was just picked up. It's a political, if you want, she's a political prisoner as part of this tete-a-tete that's going on.
Well, Professor, doesn't she need to be charged? Can't she be held?
Sure.
I mean, so why hasn't she been charged thus far?
Because somebody's breaking the rules, right? I mean, essentially, what we've got here is a regime. I mean, the Trump regime, the Trump presidency, which essentially is trying to abrogate the rules, both internationally in terms of international law and to a certain extent domestically. And so essentially she disappears for 2 days. Now, if she can get herself a lawyer, and of course they have to let her, they have to let her have a lawyer. So I say, okay, I mean, as far as I know, they can ship her down to Guantanamo. I mean, it's a completely open kind of scenario. I am sure that there are various kinds of American civil rights organizations like the ACLU, et cetera, who are going to cry bloody murder over this. And hopefully that'll help. She'll get a lawyer. They'll demonstrate that her civil rights have been, and legal rights have been violated, and there'll be pressure to get her out of there. But initially, they break the rules in order to impart fear. And in order to say to Iran, as if anybody's really listening, that, you know, we can be just as tough as you. And of course, what's going on in Iran is not the same kind of contextual scenario as what goes on here. But as far as Trump's concerned, I mean, it is. So he'll break his own rules. I hope that makes sense.
It does make sense. So let me swing over, if I could, to Dr. Saeb Shaath. They're joining us out of Belfast, author and Middle East affairs expert. Dr. Shaath, you heard Professor Davidson. He mentioned that, you know, this is essentially the U.S. poking and prodding the U.S. government. Is our co-worker here a pawn caught up in this tit for tat?
See, to start with, I want to go to France. The French yellow shirts or yellow jackets, protesters and activists, when any Western media, specifically like Fox or BBC or the French mainly, try to interview them and speak to them, they refuse to speak to, because they say directly, we don't trust Western media anymore. But watch most of the reports on or the interviews done with these guys are in two alternative media channels, Press TV and Russia's Today. That can tell you the story from the world public opinion. What is the influence and the effect of a channel like Press TV on the Western public opinion, and how respected it is by activists? I witnessed that myself firsthand in the UK and other European countries. So this is why one of the things the Western corporate media, such Fox News, BBC, other ones, many of them, CNN even, they are failing. And failing who? They are failing their deep state or the permanent state, as I would like to call it, in the United States of America. And that they cannot win for them the heart and minds of their own public opinion in the West before anywhere else. We're talking about the streets of the United States of America or Western Europe. So when you see and they witness an anchor like Marzieh Hashemi and her contribution to the dialogue with her guests, and how eloquent she is in managing the conversation and channel it without being prejudiced against anybody, and allowing all the opinions to join the debate from the right to the left to the center. And then the message coming clear, like scientifically clear, with a kind of political line exposing the activities of Western powers, and especially the war of terror, which the United States of America leading in the Arab and Islamic world, trying to entrench the occupation of the Zionist entity over Palestine. This is one. The other thing is the reactionary regimes in the Arab world, how they act as puppets when the United States of America asks them to launch wars on Yemen or in Libya or in Syria, or to try to destabilize Iran, and trying to the covert and overt operations, which all of them, and the Zionists today in the news was Netanyahu. They said he consulted the Trump administration about, in case one of their covert operations of stealing documents from Iran, if their agents caught in Iran, the Mossad agents, how the United States of America going to go and interfere and rescue them. So the whole thing is being practically exposed to the public opinion in the West mainly, which is that show they are losing the immediate war, which is covering up and showing their own people they are morally command the high ground. They are not anymore. They are appeared today as thugs, as criminals who's looting and destroying in the region, and especially now in Yemen and Syria. We've seen what they did in Iraq. Nearly 2 million people killed in Iraq. So the accusation and the way they're going to fabricate a crime against a brilliant journalist, a very smart and eloquent analyst as well, they're going to accuse him of the new law which Trump directed at anybody now. In America, he directed that at the CNN and the other corporate media. They say fake news. Today, they're going to coin that to Marzieh, and God knows what's going to happen. So we'll need to start a campaign, a grassroots campaign, to tell the world that's what they are doing. They're trying to silence the freedom of speech. They tried that before, and they tried very hard, I mean, in the UK and other Western countries, the United States of America, of taking off Press TV off the airways. They took it from the Sky network in the UK. So they keep continuing targeting the network, and they targeting the individual journalists. We have a journalist, a Press TV journalist, when she exposed the gas attacks and the chemical attacks the terrorists do through the border from Turkey to Syria. They killed her, Serene, the correspondent of Press TV. She was killed the second day. So we know these campaigns are going and going, but today it's being done openly in the hands of the leader, quote unquote, of the free world.
And if I could swing back to Professor Lawrence Davidson. Now, Professor Davidson, you very well know there's been a concerted campaign by some social media platforms to remove sites that are pro-Iranian government and critical of U.S. foreign policy and the U.S. domestic policy. Is Marzieh Hashemi, is her arrest and subsequent detention an extension of that campaign?
Well, I guess it might be. But I mean, if they wanted to, if the U.S. government wanted to silence Press TV, you wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be here. I mean, talking together. And maybe what we'll find is this is a prelude to further action against Press TV. But my feeling is that most Americans don't know what Press TV is. Even in terms of activist Americans, I don't think it's really very influential. So unless there's a sort of a decision to target Press TV that comes out of the White House or the Defense or Department of the Foreign Affairs or something like that, Secretary of State, I don't think you count enough for them to worry about you or me.
Professor Davidson,
yeah.
just 10 years ago, you could jump on your receiver right there in Pennsylvania and watch Press TV. That's no longer the case. In fact, the U.S. has aggressively gone after censoring Press TV in Western media.
That's right. But I mean, here we are. So I think what they've done is seek to marginalize us, push us out of the TV networks and Al Jazeera and others. But I don't think that this particular arrest is a function of that campaign. I think the arrest is a reaction to the fact that several Americans, for good reasons or bad reasons, have been arrested in the U.S. Have been arrested in Iran. U.S. citizens have been arrested in Iran, and this is a reaction.
If I could go back to Dr. Shaath. Now, Dr. Shaath, Marzieh was almost on her way back. If this was an outstanding FBI warrant or there was a concrete case built against her, you would have thought they would have picked her up. But then last month, she left quite a while ago. I feel she was 10 or 12 days before returning back to Tehran on a 50-plus day journey. Why did they wait so long to snatch her up? When she was right on the brink of returning home?
Just they want to fake and to manufacture and fabricate a case against her on the ground of Trump's fake news campaign. This is the only way I see myself how they can do it and try, because today you can point your fingers at anything and say fake news, and we see Trump himself doing that, and so this is the way they were going to get to her, to silence her as much as they can, and God knows what they're going to do to the lady there. I want to trust the American justice system anymore of handling such a journalist. And I believe if there is no big caliber lawyers and campaign act right now to try to pressurize the United States of America's judicial system, something might happen and an accident can happen. As I said before, a journalist before was killed when exposed some of the cases happened between Turkey and Syria. Marzieh Hashemi was a very formidable journalist who exposed a lot of the United States policies in the Middle East. Take it from Iraq to Syria to Yemen to Palestine to Saudi Arabia. And they do their best. If they cannot silence totally the network, they want to silence the journalists individually. They are targeting journalists now. If this is what the United States of America is doing today, it's a copycat of what the Zionist entity done with Palestinian journalists. They were targeting them with a sniper's bullet, targeted assassination of journalists in Palestine. So there is, to me, I don't see much difference between the Netanyahu government or the Trump administration. They are an image of each other. So at the end of the day, I worry about Marzieh, and we need to focus the efforts how to influence the public opinion worldwide to exert pressures on the administration and judicial system in the United States of America to free her, to see why she's arrested, on what the charges, and how they can prove that or justify that.
Okay, if you gentlemen could just stand by real quick, I want to play the soundbite. CEO and IRIB World Service and Press TV's chief has condemned the arrest and ill treatment of news anchor Marzieh Hashemi by U.S. police. Peyman Jebeli warned to hold U.S. authorities responsible should anything happen to Ms. Hashemi.
We as Press TV and other World Service channels condemn such behavior of U.S. police. We completely hold the U.S. government accountable for any eventuality regarding Mrs. Hashemi's health, and we want her immediate release as well as an apology from U.S. officials because of their inhumane behavior toward her. We here at the IRIB World Service and at Press TV would definitely not spare any effort to proceed with legal action that is needed for her release. We are sure that all Mrs. Hashemi's colleagues attached to domestic and international channels support these demands. We warn the U.S. government that if anything happens to Mrs. Hashemi during her detention, as I said, we hold the U.S. government responsible. The erroneous behavior that U.S. officers showed toward her does not match with any ethical norms, no matter what accusations may be leveled against her that we are not aware of. But any accusations against her does not mean they are allowed to disrespect the Muslim woman by removing her hijab against her will, as it is one of the basic rights of a Muslim woman. This behavior is not only a flagrant disrespect of Mrs. Hashemi, but also to all Muslim women across the globe. We condemn this and the disregard of her health and her righteous demands. The present case is evidence that the U.S. government, which is the so-called defender of human rights, has failed to adhere the same.
And if I could go back to Lawrence Davidson, Professor, you heard our boss, Mr. Jebedi's comments there. He said, so-called U.S. government, you purport to be champion of human rights. Here's an issue of freedom of speech here, freedom of expression. At the same time, you have basically freedom to practice your religion, freedom of religion. She has been pretty much persecuted since her detainment because of her faith. Your thoughts, please.
Well, I agree that she's the victim of persecution. I don't think it's because of her faith. I think it's because of a perception of tension and the desire to increase tension with Iran. And as a consequence of that, they use her faith and insulting her faith as a ratchet, to ratchet up that tension. So you've got these groups, you've got an element within the government, within the U.S. government, that is willing to essentially use her in this fashion. That they violate their own rules, that they violate their own principles and ideals is nothing to them. Obviously, that's the case. Now, it's not nothing to many other Americans, and I agree, I absolutely agree with your other guest that there should be protests, that there are many organizations, both civil rights organizations and Muslim organizations in the United States, that should in fact take up this case. And not only from the standpoint of this woman's rights to not be abused as a Muslim, but also her rights not to be abused because she's an American citizen, and she should have the rights of an American citizen, or for that matter, an American resident. So there's a lot at stake here. A lot at stake that goes beyond any international relations or the problems of international relations between Iran and the United States. What's at stake here is the principles, the rules, the rule of law here in the United States. And Trump is, and the Trump administration is really numb and deaf to this aspect of the problem. And I think that your other guest is right. There should be protests, and these are very basic American, as you said, freedom of religion, freedom of speech. These are very basic American rights on which to build the case to get Mrs. Hashemi out of here, out of jail, and back to Tehran.
And if I could swing back over to Dr. Shaath. Dr. Shaath, I mean, this is not an isolated incident. In the past 5 years that I've worked with Mrs. Hashemi, she's traveled to the States at least half a dozen times. Every single time she told me that she was detained in the airport wherever she landed, multiple hours, 3 to 5, sometimes 6 or 7 hours detained. She said that she had a triple S, something to that effect, slapped on her American passport, which means she is a security threat. Here's a person that the only crime that she has ever committed is just being a critical journalist, which in a lot of people's eyes is not a crime, to say the least. So please tell me, a person that has never had a record, why were they detained and arrested? Why are they considered a security threat to America?
Because she is a decent human being. She is a human being, believes in her rights of freedom of speech and of everyone else right to know the truth. This is the danger they see. They see she using the platform of Press TV eloquently in exposing crimes done against humanity in the name of Western powers. Soldiers from the United States of America come and be killed in the Middle East and kill so many Arabs and Muslims in the Middle East. That kind of exposure with facts, numbers, and that, which is the other side. Whatever they did, they lost the credibility which before their own public opinion start in believing them. maybe your guest will comprehend what is the influence of Press TV was on movements like occupying in New York, or occupying London, or occupying Belfast, or something. We witness, because I mingle a lot along with activists, and I see in Facebook a lot of the clips, which is video clips, being exchanged between activists and become viral over the media, are originated from Press TV or RT. With these things, we are saying not emotionally or compassionate about this, but facts and scientific and knowledge. So these sort of things, this is the kind of threats the United States of America and other Western intelligence services or media watchdogs like Ofcom want to eliminate, because they want to secure their investment in the Arab world, which is the Zionist entity, to keep looting that area and to dominate that area, exposing the presence of that criminal entity, how it appeared, and keep on, and encourage the activists to stand against it, to stand with the BDS movement, which has become wide, worldwide. And today, the United States of America, they're gonna make anybody who stands against the Zionist entity a criminal. So to the limit, there is no oath for the United States in America to the citizens of the United States of America to be supportive of any American political parties or the state or that, but they demand of the United States of America an oath of support and to be loyal to the Zionist entity Israel. And we know the story of the teacher who refused to adhere to that oath. She was dismissed as a teacher from her school. When you put a story like that on a Press TV, it exposes that the state, United States of America, the Zionist movement, enslaving it against the will of its own people. They don't like to see that. The Zionist lobby working hard in the United States of America to eliminate voices like that, like Marzieh and other journalists.
And if I could put that question now to Dr. Davidson. Dr. Davidson, tell me please how a person like Marzieh Hashemi, my coworker and dear colleague and friend, is a security threat to America when she's never been convicted or even, accused of a crime within her entire life, and all she does is, she shifts her time between, she shares time between, our network here, her family, and just a few local universities. Please tell me how she is a threat to America.
She isn't. She's not. I mean, she is a pawn. She's a victim. Again, I really don't know if the target here is Press TV. Obviously, there are people in the government who watch Press TV, and they watch you, and they watch me, and others, and they watched Mrs. Hashemi. And so, like you said, she had made several periodic visits to her family here. So they knew her, they knew she was coming. And the question is not, is she a security threat to the U.S.? She's not. And they know she's not, ultimately. The question is, why now, right? Why now? And I think the answer to that has to do with the elements within the Trump administration who are playing a game of kind of chicken. You take our people, we take your people, and then we've got hostages. I really think that they're not smart enough to really go much beyond that in the Trump administration. So I think that that Press TV has been marginalized. I think Al Jazeera and RT have been marginalized, and we'll see if they initiate more attempts to close you down. But right now, my opinion is that Mrs. Hashemi is a victim of this tete-a-tete that's going on between the two governments, and she's a hostage. And I think that, yeah, there has to be pressure put on the U.S. government within the context of U.S. law to get her out of there.
And Mr. Davidson, there's also an unconfirmed report that I heard one of my previous guests about an hour ago mention. He said that he found a post where Reza Hashemi, her son, said that his mother has been, after 2 days, the FBI told him that we need your mom as a material witness in another case. My question to you, if that's the case, if you believe, first tell me if you believe that narrative or not coming out from the FBI, and if you do, that explanation, you believe it, why would they do it in such a fashion where they would snatch her up at an airport in Missouri and ship her in custody to Washington, D.C. and not tell her family for 2 days?
And, I don't believe it. I do. There is, if you want to get imaginative about this, if they claim that she's a material witness to something else, they can then subpoena her before a jury, before a grand jury or something like that, and force her to answer questions. And if she refuses to answer questions, then they've got a case against her. Now, that's totally speculative.
But I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm glad you mentioned that, Professor. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm glad you mentioned that, the word subpoena, because that was going to be my next question to you. Why not just subpoena her? Why detain her?
Yeah, I think that they're just playing rough. And the message is to your government, not to Press TV, not to you and me. It's to your government, which they perceive as an active threat to Israeli or other interests in the area, Saudi interests, whatever. But I don't know whether that material witness business is really just true, or not true. My guess is that it's just not true. But you can see how they could manipulate the situation under those circumstances.
And I want to put that question to, if I could, Dr. Shaath, do you believe in this post supposedly where, the FBI has given the explanation to Mrs. Hashemi's family that that the case has nothing to do with her, but that they need her as a material witness elsewhere? And if that's so, then why apprehend her and put her through what they put her through the last few days?
I agree with the point of opinion, which is your guest said. We should have subpoenaed her if that. A subpoena would be sufficient enough. She would turn up and give evidence if that's required, because she is a United States of America citizen at the end of the day. But I believe myself that this is just trying to destroy the lady in a way or the other. And because you look who is running the show of the United States of America. You have Bolton, you have Pompeo, you have Trump and Kushner. This is the gang who run the state. And some of them are involved heavily before, like in this death squads in Latin America or Iraq. And I'll give you an example of Kushner, the son-in-law of Trump, when he had access at the beginning of President Trump, a briefing from the CIA and other intelligence agencies. He used to read the briefing for the United States of America, the president, and he informed his friend MB Asif Mohammed bin Salman of a list of dissident princes or Saudis who wanted to do something against him and against his taking over of the Saudi Arabia, or the coup, de facto coup he's creating. And what happens after that? The extortion of the Saudi Arabia has so much money, and then we discovered suddenly the arrest of the princes, Walid bin Talal and the other, and the Prime Minister of Lebanon, hanging them from their legs in there, and take their money, lots of their money, extortion ways, and suddenly the killing of Khashoggi, the journalist, the Saudi journalist, in the Saudi's consulate in Istanbul. All of these things linked will show you what kind of people we are dealing with. They have no regards to human beings' lives. What do you think if they think of jailing Marzieh Hashemi as in the United States of America for fake news or whatever. We have to be worried in here. We have to create a kind of movement on the ground to pressurize the United States of America and the establishment of that to tell us why they arrested her, what is the reason, what is her crimes, and if she done something wrong, send her, like put her in court and let the jury judge that. But we couldn't see anything apart from the United States of America trying to silence her. The United States of America don't want the press TV or any of its journalists exposing its role in the Arab world and Islamic world anymore.
And if I could, I'm going to play this soundbite really quick. If both of you gentlemen just stand by for a sec. Civil rights activist Yahida Oren Amila says that the U.S. hostile stance toward Iran is one of the reasons that Marzieh is now in U.S. custody. Have a listen.
I think that it's important to say that she is coming from Iran, and all of the things that has been happening here around immigration and border control and all that type of stuff, I think directly ties into, her being targeted. And also that, I think her being a Black woman who is a Muslim is also a key piece as well. I just think that overall, I think that regardless of age and situation, what we're going to see more and more now through this presidency and probably through another presidency after that is just an increase, cracking down on people who consider themselves activists or revolutionaries. And so they even have this thing here called the Black identity extremist. I'm not saying that she is technically a Black identity extremist, but it's one of the categories that have been placed on a group of people, my people, who actually fight for the rights of our people and basically identifying us as terrorists. So if that can happen internally to us as a group, right, domestically colonized African people, there's no limit to what can happen to anybody who comes in from so-called problem countries.
And if I could go back to our guest, Professor Lawrence Davidson, I just found on Associated Press, there is an article, a very recent one, just breaking actually, that according to her son, Hussein Hashemi, that the FBI told her that she's been held in prison apparently as a material witness, and at the same time, they want the other siblings to be subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury. I mean, does this really add up? It seems like it really doesn't, because you very well mentioned they could have handled this thing with a subpoena. They could have even handled it without her being on U.S. soil through an affidavit, a signed affidavit at anywhere in the Middle East at a U.S. mission here, diplomatic mission.
Does the article refer to what she was supposed to have witnessed as materially? I mean, is there a subject here?
No, zero information. FBI has said nothing.
Yeah. I think that it's essentially a case of a sort of emotional blackmail. I mean, without saying what it is that she's supposed to have witnessed, it's very, very difficult to know whether this is real or it's just a way of deflecting the fact that they've kidnapped this woman against American laws. So it's, they've figured out a storyline for this. It's very difficult to say. And it is an interesting aspect of the case that she is a Black African-American woman who was converted to Islam. So essentially, within a certain element of the government, I mean, she's got 4 out of 5 major cardinal sins against her. So there might very well be a racist or a racial aspect to this. But again, I think when we get down to the nitty-gritty, we're just playing, pressure games between the two governments. But I think this can in fact blow up into something much more than the U.S. government thought it would be. For instance, there are Muslim organizations like CAIR, C-A-I-R. There are civil rights organizations like the ACLU. There are African American organizations, and who knows? And there are organizations of journalists who watch out for these kinds of prosecutions of journalists. So I think there's an array of interest groups here in the United States who could make this into a much bigger kind of situation than the government wants or anticipated.
And if I could, Dr. Shaath, I mean, you mentioned, Dr. Davidson said there could be a slew of reasons why Marzieh Hashemi is being attacked by federal authorities, and she was boarding a flight from St. Louis, Missouri to Denver, Colorado at the time of her detainment. And at that time, she was actually in St. Louis covering a Black Lives Matter documentary for Press TV, obviously. So how much does this have to do with her work, in your view? How much does it have to do with her being critical of the U.S. government's domestic and foreign policy with respect to what she does for Press TV? And how much do you think it has to do with the fact that she's an African-American woman who converted to Islam?
Thank you for saying that. All what you said is exactly why they did that to her. She is a brilliant journalist. She's very intelligent, and she's very capable. And the way she does her show at the time and control the narrative and the conversation in non-biased way. Anyone watches Marzieh's debating or hosting guests, or they'll understand this woman is very educated, very eloquent, and gives the chance to all point of views to be presented. And at the end of the day, the show comes out of with a very sophisticated answers to what's going on. And these answers exposing what the United States of America is after in the Arab world and Islamic world, and what the United States of America is involved in doing against Iran, trying to destabilize the state. They think the Iranian revolution, the people, when they become sovereign over their nation after the Islamic revolution, is betrayal to the United States of America. The American administration till today, they believe the resources in Iran, it belongs to the United States of America, not to the Iranian people. This is the unbelievable way of the American administration and its multinationals, the oil multinationals way of thinking. They want to lure the Iranians of their own wealth. And that's why all this destabilizing covert and overt operations happening against Iran, led by the Zionist entity and supported by Saudi Arabia and others. And we've seen so many Iranian scientists being assassinated, and so many industrial bases being sabotaged, so when you have that is being analyzed and broadcasted worldwide, and Marzieh played a very kind of active role in exposing these things, then they're going to punish her. This is what I believe myself. I believe the whole thing is part of from suffocating and stagnating the Iran in an economical way, and trying to use the journalists in a way to silence them, so it will be easier for the United States of America to put its own narratives and trying to achieve a regime change in Iran.
If I could, Lawrence Davidson, we don't have much time left, but I want to give you a couple minutes. Was this an attack, or do you feel this is an attack on Marzieh Hashemi, the person, on free press, or on the Iranian government?
No, I think it's directly directed at the Iranian government. She's just a pawn in this. But by doing this, by using her in this way, they do attack free speech, and they do attack independent journalism. So by the way, I mean, they don't see Press TV as a journalistic operation. Let me tell you this. The U.S. government sees Press TV and RT as propaganda instruments. So there are people in the government who won't respond to saying, they'll say she's not a journalist. But they do violate her rights. They do violate free speech. And she is a journalist, and other journalists will recognize this. And so I think there's a potential here for a bigger story. But from the point of view of the people who created this crisis or this incident, the goal was to show the Iranian government that the U.S. government can take hostages. I mean, that's how I read it.
If I could put that to you, the same question to you, if you would do us the honor of addressing that question, Professor Shaath. Is this an attack on my coworker Marzieh, on freedom of speech, on the free press, on free speech, or is it an attack out of Washington on Tehran?
It's an attack on freedom of speech to begin with, because Marzieh Hashemi was, as I said, is a brilliant journalist, and they want to silence her. So this is an attack on the Western public opinion as well, because the people in the West are entitled to know facts. They need to know what's going on. They need to know what their government is involved in, and when the United States of America sent its own navy or its own soldiers, where their people going to be, what they're going to be doing, or if some family lost a soldier in there, they want to understand why, and to make the American government accountable. That's why they're targeting journalists like Marzieh, because she can tell the American public opinion what their sons are doing in there, and how they are party to crimes against humanity and to war crimes as well. And the United States of America, and they send its armies to represent multinational companies to loot resources, to put it at the hands of these big greedy companies.
And before let you guys go, I want to thank both of you. Lawrence Davidson, professor at Westchester University. They're joining us out of Westchester, Pennsylvania. Dr. Saeb, Shaath, author and Middle East affairs expert, joining us out of Belfast. And now we're going to conclude now, everyone, for about 12 or 13 minutes, this extended coverage on the arrest and detainment of Press TV anchor Marzieh Hashemi by U.S. authorities on her 50-day trip to the States. 40-plus days were up with respect to her travels. She was ready to return home to Tehran, and she was detained with no explanation to her relatives whatsoever. We'll keep you updated accordingly. We'll be back in less than a little over 10 minutes time to continue this extended coverage. Thank you, everyone. Thank you both.